like to introduce Simon Casperson from Communications Director at SPACE10 and on behalf of my products and the RCA. Thank you very much for coming in today. I'm not going to explain anything. In fact, I just want to hand over to you and then you can talk about what SPACE10 does and some of the projects that you're currently working on and how to work. So thank you very much for coming in.
Hi guys, thank you for having me. So, my intention with this little talk, what do we have? We have like an hour together or something like that?
Yeah. If you want to have a little bit more, so everyone hang on.
Otherwise you just leave. But my intention with this talk is actually just to give you a super chaotic introduction to what the heck we do at SPACE10, show you guys some of the projects that we're working on, and also explain a little bit more about how we approach innovation. But first, let me actually explain and tell you what we are. So SPACE10 is a research and design lab on a mission to create a better and more sustainable way of living. We're based in Copenhagen. This is our building. It used to be an old fish factory, and we turned it into a so-called future living lab. So basically, I'm just checking. The framing is a little. But this guy is called Ingvar Kamprad. He's the founder of IKEA. IKEA is a rather successful Swedish furniture company. And IKEA has sort of an overall vision of creating a better everyday life for the many people. They came around after the Second World War and wanted to do nice designer furniture that was affordable for the many. And they sort of had this vision of creating a better everyday life. And I had the chance to actually run into the CEO of IKEA a couple of years back. We were asked to do a furniture line for IKEA. I was part of a small creative studio. My colleague and one of the other co-founders of SPACE10, had done like an inspirational talk for some of the top management in IKEA. And she of course couldn't meet the CEO of IKEA without pitching something that they could collaborate on. We were quite small, we didn't really make any money, but we were happy and passionate. But anyway, she ended up suggesting the idea that we would do a furniture line for IKEA, which was sort of for young people living in urban areas. It should be limited edition. And then the only requirement as well was that there would be no furniture designers involved in actually designing this furniture line. So we involved a lot of different people, so everything from like a gallerist, graphic designer, stylist, a lot of people working with aesthetics, and we ended up making this furniture line. And then what happens, which I guess you guys know, because it's sort of your field, is we handed in the designs, and then from IKEA actually have the finalized designs that's out in the stores take 2 to 3 years, which meant I went on, I started doing documentary films, and I was actually really happy doing that. Suddenly, the furniture line also have what we call culture, which is basically the notion that the ambitions we have are way too big for an organization of, we are 27 permanent people at SPACE10. So the ambitions and aspirations we have are far too big for us to achieve it alone, which means that we need to collaborate with all the bright minds out there. So So we really don't believe in competition, we really believe in collaboration. That is how we have set up our entire method system, and also how I know James. We have sort of met when we needed some expertise in areas where we were not that knowledgeable. And it's really the notion that if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. Like, we are at a time where we need to surround ourselves with people who are smarter than us. We are completely dependent on other people, and we are humble enough to recognize that. So our entire model is actually to say, okay, let's actually try to have a core team that is as small as possible. And then we take in people that comes in, work on a specific project in residency, that can work there from 3 to 6 months, that is completely focused on a single project. Often it's their passion project, but something that aligns with us, where they don't need to answer emails and all these daily things that the rest of us has to deal with. They can basically just focus on solving a certain task, which also allows us, instead of trying to build up this in-house team of experts in so many different fields, we can actually reach out and connect with people that we think are already doing incredible work and ask whether they want to collaborate. Then we have collaborators, which is other companies. We really like to work with, you could say, medium-sized design studios, studios that are big enough to scale up, but also not these sort of IDEO frog that do incredible work, but it's also a really easy way to burn your money, and we don't have idea budgets. So we actually like to work with the ones who are really on the frontier, who are really sort of hungry to do interesting work, and really want to change something. And then finally we have what we call our community, but basically where we try to share our research in communities where that information is relevant, as well as actually receiving inspiration and information from those people. This is the team, and yeah, there's not a lot of interesting things to say about that. You can see if you can find me. But then we also took this decision of saying, okay, yes, we are both a research and design lab, but so much of the knowledge that we need is already out there. And the problem is not that we don't have the knowledge, the problem is that people simply don't engage with the knowledge that they need. So instead of just doing research and use 300-page reports that nobody was going to read unless they're paid to or really enthusiastic about some niche area, we said, okay, how can we actually make our research portable? How can we actually engage more people in some of our findings or some of our questions, and start a broader discussion around what we're actually interested in. So we created what we call playful research. It's basically where the left brain meets the right. This is a brain on acid. And the way we do playful research is, for example, saying, okay, how do we actually engage with people in the notion that our food system is kind of broken, that from an apple is picked on the tree till it ends up in your supermarket, it takes an average of 11 months, at least in the States, according to Caleb Howard from MIT. How can we actually start a discussion around producing food close to what we actually need, it's what it's consumed, in our cities close to our daily lives? How can we actually make sure that our children knows where food comes from? And we have this industrial model where everything was produced, where we can't really see it or connect with it. So we did an architecture competition, basically exploring food producing architecture for an art fair in Copenhagen. Two students came up with the idea of the grow room, a spherical garden where you can both produce your herbs and greeneries, but it also provides like a little sanctuary in busy city lives where you can actually come in, connect with nature, and have a little peace of mind. And this grow room was supposed to be sort of a one-off, especially for this exhibition. But then suddenly we started receiving a lot of requests. So suddenly people wanted to exhibit it in Rio de Janeiro, in Helsinki, in Taipei. And we were like, okay, we're trying to promote the idea of local production of food. Does it make sense to shift this 4x4 structure around the world to promote the idea of local production? So we said no, it doesn't really. And then some of the work we've done with James actually around digital fabrication, the idea of starting to actually design products that can live as digital files to be downloaded and printed on demand. That is to say, okay, let's actually test this idea around open fabrication. Let's actually try to open source it. So we turned it into a digital file and made a little instruction similar to like an IKEA instruction guide. 17 steps, 17 sheets of plywood, and then you could basically print out the parts you needed in order to create your own little grow room. So we changed the dimensions a little bit so it could fit like a standard, sort of standard plywood sheets, and also in order for it to work on the smallest CNC available sheet boards. And then you could sort of make your own little grow room, also in one material, so it became more affordable. And then we just uploaded that, and suddenly, within the first month, it was downloaded 30,000 times. So we were just like, what the fuck? Because, I mean, one thing is to download and print and share, or something that is actually, in dimensions that you can comprehend. But this is a 3x3 structure, like, who was taking on that challenge? But people did. So suddenly we just see it popping up in cities around the world, and people really love it. I mean, we even made it to Jesus Camp. We have hope of the resurrection of Jesus. He is alive. And I think this is sort of the peak, if you want to be a designer, that if you bring Jesus back, fucking made it. But it was also a little bit like, okay, it's an interesting conversation starter, but it doesn't really solve what we're trying to solve, which is how do we bring food production closer to our cities. This is, of course, a good way for people to connect with nature, but in a way we're not going to solve fix our global food system by having grow rooms all over the place. So we said, okay, what can we actually, the insights that we've learned now, what can we actually use it for? So we said, okay, you can also see that there's a lot of, we have our global housing crisis, and we see a lot of favelas, townships, slums around the world. Could we actually create like an open source house that people could then download? So 2 architecture students were put on that task. They came from residency, 6 months, tried to create an open source house that was really both affordable, sustainable, and should be able to be created locally using a CNC. So they did. They created this beautiful system. The reason why it's not bigger is that we could do it without actually getting building permits in Denmark, which is 49 square meters, I believe it is. But what they did was actually creating this modular system, so depending on your family size or whatever, you could sort of customize it to your needs and have it produced. just running out. But it's also important for me to say that we're not done. The design is not optimal. We still have a lot of challenges in terms of like with some drainage and there's some other headaches that we sort of discovered. But the beauty there is that we completely open sourced it. So that means that now architects, makers, designers, passionate people can basically download it. We have shared all the challenges that we see with the design. And then people actually start to elaborate on that, start fixing the small bugs here and there, actually adding to the design. So instead of architecture today, where you will sort of start over every time you build something new, here the design is just becoming better over time. And this is also a great way for us, being 27 people, to actually just tap into the collective creativity of the world. Whoever want to be part of the project can take part of it. So it's sort of a very democratic way of democratizing housing. Another playful research project, one of our latest ones, is what we call Spaces on Wheels. And it's basically the notion that self-driving cars are coming, but when self-driving cars are fully autonomous, then they're not cars anymore. And they're basically just spaces on wheels. The whole function of transportation is sort of, it's not the main thing anymore. Spaces can be anything. It can be a hotel, it can be a cafe, it can be a farm, it can be an office, it can be healthcare on wheels. Branded message. It can be retail on wheels. And here this playful research project is like IKEA is not sort of interested in going into manufacturing cars. This is not why we're researching this, but this is also, I think, similar to the smartphone. Even though you're not in telecommunication, when the smartphone sort of arrived, it disrupted everyone's business. Everybody had impact on it and needed to change because of it. And it's a little bit the same here. But also when cars are no longer cars, but basically an extension of your office or your home, or are these completely ecosystems on wheels that you can order on demand. Then they can do anything. What really provoked us was that if you just try to Google car of the future, but you have actually looked at what's coming out of all of these car manufacturers, it's always these very masculine, chrome-painted, sterile, hard science fiction cars that looks like the Batmobile or something. And we were like, this is not the future that we dream of. We don't dream of this sci-fi future. I don't know why we are so keen on making all of these sci-fi films from the 80s and 90s and reality. That this has been the inspiration of all of the people that are actually designing things today are these sci-fi films, and then that is basically what we're ending up with. So we wanted something that was more, you could say, welcoming, colorful, soft, human in a way. And this is also just a way for us to sort of just add our comment to that conversation around how should we design the future of mobility. Obviously, we need to design cities that are designed for pedestrians, for biking, for public transportation. But no matter what, this is coming, so let's actually have a debate about how they should look like. So we did that, and then we brought all the spaces to life in augmented reality. So if you download the SPACE10 app, you can, similar to ordering an Uber, you can order one of these spaces, and they drive up to your doorstep in augmented reality. Requires an iPhone. And I think Actually, I think this is a really important notion that people often ask us, because we are sitting with sort of calling ourselves a future living lab. So people often ask us to predict the future, or asking what's going to happen in 10 years, what's going to happen in 20 years. Like that no matter what we do today, the future is already determined. And I don't believe that. I don't think that we can predict it in any way. So we have just sort of agreed that let's actually try to shape the future that we dream of, and try to push for that becoming a reality. And that's a little bit of the same here. We are not going into car manufacturing, at least not yet. But let's actually have a conversation about how these spaces should be. Then another topic we had, another playful research project, was that we were, like one thing is what we can design for the billion people platforms we have today, but also what are the billion people platforms of tomorrow. So of course, soon as designers, we are not, like we have such a long time designed for screens, whether it's phone, a tablet, or a computer. Everything has been visual, and suddenly we have all these virtual assistants coming into our lives, whether it's Siri or Google Home or Alexa or whatever. Really seeing that, okay, soon the way we're going to interact with technology is basically just going to talk to it. We are not going to learn the language of computers. Computers are learning the language of humans, which means that we can interact with it in a much more natural way. So that's of course interesting for us in terms of saying, okay, then suddenly there's no logo, there's no fonts, there's no nothing. It's basically a personality. So what's the personality of IKEA? Is it a man? Is it a woman? And just bouncing these ideas around how do we actually design the personality of IKEA for the technology of tomorrow? And then we started exploring, and then so okay, why is it actually that all these virtual assistants are females? Like, no matter what, they're always females. They're always obedient. If you ask Siri to suck your dick, I'd blush if I could. So we are basically having some privileged white guys sitting in London, Silicon Valley, and China, designing the technology that's going to live with all of us. And technology is not objective. It's as biased as the data is fed and the people designing it. And we're like, okay, artificial intelligence is coming. It can provide huge benefits for humankind for sure. But we also want to have a little broader conversation about that we actually need some diversity in the team that are actually developing this. So we did a project called Do You Speak Human, where we basically asked people to design their own AI, where they can choose whether it should be a man, a woman, whether it should be gender neutral, what kind of personality it should have, all of that. So basically just getting people to think about that all the digital assistants that surround us today are the same type of personality. And I don't know, maybe it's getting a little too philosophical, but I was also, you remember that, I remember as a child that, you got a pet because then you sort of develop, what do you call it, it would make you a better human because you would actually treat it well and stuff like that, and that would sort of reflect on how you interact with others. And I was also like, okay, if we have an entire generation that are just been brought up by these obedient females, like what kind of view on women are we actually going to have tomorrow? Anyway, that's another conversation. So we launched this, and then suddenly we got people from 140 countries actually going in and they sort of designing their own AI. And we got a lot of sort of mails from people working in tech companies, actually working in some of the companies that we were directly criticizing. That was just so relieved saying this is such an important conversation. And that felt really good. But it's not all tech. we run multiple projects. Are you guys okay? I feel like I'm speed talking a bit. Everybody, yeah, good? Great. Okay, so we need 70% more food. How do we do that? Well, we just produce some more food. Well, unfortunately, it's not that easy. Sorry, so we just. So the way we produce food today is a massive driver of climate change. It uses our dwindling supplies of fresh water. It really sort of destroys forests and grasslands and blah blah blah. It's broken, but we need a lot more of it. So another playful research project we did was basically exploring alternatives. What are the alternatives to, let's say, meat? What kind of options do we actually have as humans? So we explored that. We kidnapped IKEA's iconic meatball, and then we just projected different food trends on that little shape. So exploring everything from insects to algae to food waste to a lot of different things. Again, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. So we do our research, but instead of then saying, okay, now we have the answer, we more ask the questions, what are the healthy, sustainable alternatives? And then we invite people in. So here we have a guy from Nordic Food Lab, which is sort of known as Innovation Kitchen, coming and presenting their research. We have experts in a lot of different fields. We invited the industry to actually meet together and talk about how we actually tackle this challenge of the food industry today, what we have for options. We share our research with media, and again, instead of a 300-page report, it's basically just 8 visuals with picture captions that suddenly start to steer up a conversation. And then, I mean, I really like this Mike Tyson quote, which is, you know, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And this is why we really like to share our ideas and research really early on, because sometimes there's something we overlooked. Some comment completely kills an idea, and it's much better that an idea is killed 3 weeks into the idea rather than 2 years in, where you have worked in a vacuum, investing a lot of time and money in some project. You haven't revealed it to the world, and when you release it, and are just waiting that the world will applaud, and it's just killed instantly. We prefer to actually share very early on. So we actually also, besides the visuals, we actually started cooking these. So here we have the insect meatball made with mealworms, and then we actually serve it. And if any of you are in the insect food industry, it might take a couple of years, like people are not that excited about eating insects yet, at least not when we serve it with whole mealworms. It makes sense in flour and other things, and you know something is happening, but there are other things that are closer to reach. And we also try with the bunker. And it's actually delicious. The fun thing about the mealworms is that they don't really have any flavor as such. So you basically just add that with vegetables and other things. Then algae. Algae was a thing that we really fell in love with. Spirulina or microalgae is such a great, I mean, it's nothing new. The UN said in 74, I believe it was, that this was the most ideal food for mankind. First of all, it can double in size within a day. It doesn't put any pressure on the environment. Actually, it grows by taking CO2 from the air, using that to grow. It just needs water and sunlight. You can grow it anywhere on the planet. It contains more protein than meat. 50 times more iron than in spinach, all the essential amino acids, and all the benefits of this in terms of nutrition are much easier for the body to obtain than any other food source. So okay, we were like, okay, this is the holy grail of food, we finally found it. The only problem was that it tastes like fucking shit. That's a problem. Because, you know, when you want to have people change their diets, it doesn't really matter how healthy it is or how sustainable it is. It needs to be delicious. So we were like, okay, what do we do? So we actually took in a chef in residence, and he just started exploring all of these food trends, actually looking at how people make all of these delicious. So let me present the dog's hot dog, which is a meatless hot dog where the bread is infused with microalgae. So it contains more protein than a hot dog with meat, and this actually tastes good. Then we also said, okay, the grow room is maybe not the solution, but hydroponic farming might be. So we turned a room in our basement into a farm where we used artificial lights. We started growing microgreens in water, not in soil. We had sensors so we can basically control the pH levels of the plants. We could control the lighting, actually the color of the lighting. Basically creating the perfect spring day every day. Like it's never clouded when you control everything. So this means that we can grow 3 times faster than in the field on much less space and using 90% less water. On the other side, the produce is super fresh. There's no food waste because you basically harvest when you need it. And no chemicals, all the nutrients are there. So if, like the apple I mentioned earlier, actually a lot of the fruit and vegetables that we see as fresh is not really that fresh, which means that most apples are basically a little more of sugar. So they lost all the antioxidants and nutrients in the process. Of course, it's a living thing, so it slowly dies. So we were like, okay, how do people actually feel about this? Like it's grown in basements and it feels very artificial, or it might feel very artificial. And another thing, because it's so fresh, it actually is much more tasty than what you can buy in the supermarket. So we were also really curious of whether this would be too flavorful. So we said, okay, let's actually test it out. So during London Design Festival week, I think London Design Festival last summer, we said, okay, let's actually open a salad bar and basically grow the salads where we serve it. So we did. We took over a little space and welcome people to actually have tastings of this salads. And the good thing is that people really, really loved it. They completely got it. They didn't feel it was weird that it was grown in this way. And they really liked the taste of it. So as you can see, suddenly we have moved from saying, okay, we have tomorrow's meatball and exploration of future food trends, whatever, to actually start prototyping different things, serving them, actually looking at what is working, what is not, to actually something that we really believe in, and then start piloting it, actually building the whole narrative, the whole space, doing the concept, opening up, getting feedback from real people, which means that our farm in our basement is now closed down because IKEA invested in arrow farms instead. The biggest vertical farming company right now, and they're expanding fast, and that is hopefully give you a little bit of insights how you can say a very experimental, playful research project that happens between 3 people is suddenly influencing one of the biggest design companies in the world to invest in our farms. We might ask, IKEA, we mentioned furniture, but actually IKEA sells a lot of food. It's the 6th largest restaurant chain in the world. It's the biggest exporter of food in Sweden. basically a huge part of their business. So now they're actually prototyping as well to have vertical farming in their stores and their restaurants as well. But besides this, if you find any of the dishes delicious, we are publishing our first book, which is going to be a cookbook, which is future food that you can make today, including videos for making a bioreactor, growing your own algae, or having your own little mealworm farm. Going to release it in April if we're not steering up too much legal issues. And then quickly, I also just wanted to share, especially now when I'm surrounded by designers. And by the way, not a designer as such. My background is in communication, as James also mentioned, in filmmaking and quality. But I think for me was when spending so much time with designers, and there's still this whole sort of thinking that, you know, good design is human-centered. Like it's human-focused, it's human-centered. If we just really sort of understand the needs of the human, then we're going to make good designs. And I have always wondered a little bit about this human-centered design, because the way we design today is not really going that well, if we have to be honest with each other. I mean, we had like the climate is changing. This summer we saw heating records in 4 continents. There was droughts in India, South Africa, California. Like there's something about just putting humans in the center that's not really going to fix humanity's problems. And if we're being honest with each other, then the biggest threat for humanity is humanity itself. So yeah, I tried to make a graph to explain it. And if we have problems over here and time here, you are here, and soon shit hits the fan. The UN came out with their climate report, and we have 12, 20 years. That is sort of the time perspective before it's irreversible. And I think for us as designers, can you feel it? This childhood dream of going to RCA and becoming a designer. But we as designers, we have a quite interesting challenge, because a lot of it is on us. Like the biggest creative challenge that we face as a human race right now is how we actually design solutions for this. How do we transform our current consumption-oriented economic system into a self-sustainable society? Like, how do we actually make that transformation? That is not about anything besides creativity. That is about actually exploring new solutions and really taking our responsibility as designers seriously. So the way that we sort of have approached it is, yes, people are for sure important. So is nature, society as a whole, and technology is most likely going to be a huge building block in that. So we try to, of course, design for people, for well-being, for happiness, for individual empowerment, for society, taking a much more holistic approach. How do we actually create community for nature? Both in terms of how we source energy, what materials are we using, and how can we design circular business models. And finally, how can we actually use technology? Because I don't really believe that in order to really tackle the challenges that we're facing, that we can rely on the individual to behave in a different way. Like we have all the facts, we've known for years, and humans don't really seem to make decisions based on facts or anything rational, but more emotions. So could we actually use technology to design new ways of being, so it's in the system and the responsibility on the individual. So we try to see patterns where we don't see chaos. And I had the pleasure of being invited today by James, of course, but also Stephen, who wanted to talk about our newest project, which is around shared living. And I mean, it's pretty obvious that that we have an affordable housing crisis, especially now when we're in London, where I mean, it seems like that ordinary people cannot really afford to live here, like that it's simply not affordable anymore. And the current housing debate is so much focused on how do we build more housing, but I think this is also a really good time to actually ask, how would we like to live? What kind of, like if we are to welcome 2.5 billion people to our cities, that means we need to build a city the size of New York every second month for the next 35 years. So what have we actually learned from the way that we have built cities until now? How can we actually learn from that and maybe design it differently? So another huge challenge we have sort of taken on to explore that. And again, we were like, okay, let's actually start by asking people, instead of sitting in some vacuum and thinking about what we would like to or what we dream about, let's actually ask people. So we launched this survey where we had people from 160 countries participate. And the interesting thing was, I think that what I hated the most on the internet are sort of web forms and surveys. And I was like, who the fuck came up with the idea of doing like a global survey on future living on people that are never going to take a survey on that. But they did. And we actually created the biggest pool of knowledge when it comes to co-living. This survey is now informing architects and developers in China, in Taiwan, in Sweden, in the States, in Canada, on how they should actually design these spaces. And I hope that I have sound. I don't know how much. So I just want to introduce quickly what the heck was the survey about and what was the results. And we're actually exhibiting this project at the London Design Museum from tomorrow. So if you're interested in watching the film again, you can go, but otherwise you hopefully get a chance to see right now. So again, this survey was sort of a playful research project that sort of started our whole integration into shared living. We could see on one hand that we have a global housing crisis. It's simply too expensive. On the other hand, we can see that we are still building in the same way as we did in the 50s, where everything was designed for nuclear families. But that's not really how we live today. Like single-person households, most decent households are in the world. Everybody's on the move, whether to study or work in the city. And suddenly we are ending up with these flatmates in an apartment or in a house that is designed for a family, which of course is like we lack privacy. So we were really asking ourselves, okay, we can see on one hand that people in cities get more and more lonely. We can see that housing cost is rising. We can see that people are stressed out, like especially family with children. On the other hand, we don't accept segregation when it comes to race or religion or gender. But when it comes to age, we have no problem with just putting people in some nursery home where we can't really see them. But they don't really die that fast, do they? They just sit there healthy, alive, vibrant, but they don't have any purpose. So we will actually put all of these challenges that we're facing actually just be put in one bowl and said, okay, could we actually create a new type of housing? Could we actually design our housing in a way where we, one, take care of people's privacy for sure, make sure that people have their own space. Could we at the same time create an interesting community closer to, you could say, human biology, when we lived in smaller tribes of, let's say, 20 to 40 people with some communal areas where people could actually socialize, where people could pool resources. And could the elderly generation be part of that community that actually has time on their hands for some parts? Like my parents retired a couple of years ago and they are really, really busy. But a lot of people are not that busy. And suddenly we could actually see that families that don't have a lot of time, no one really to look after their children, could the elderly in the community actually take some of that pressure off? And could they in return get help when maybe there's some physical stuff that they need help for? Could the children actually become more interested in people because they will be exposed to a lot of different people, a lot of different opinions, a lot of perspectives, so we don't just end up in these echo chambers of both our physical and physical world. And we found that a really interesting area to explore and say, okay, could we make living, could the future business of IKEA actually be architecture? Could we create spaces that are both affordable, sustainable, and livable? And we hope that we can do that. And that is really the challenge that we have taken on now. We didn't stop with the survey. We actually started to explore a lot of cases from around the world and created a research report, 160 pages. And if you're interested in this subject, you can download it for free on our website. We also made a podcast, 4 episodes, basically exploring how to design cities of tomorrow, how to design for happiness, and whether co-living is actually a better way of living. And that you can find on your, whoever you use for podcasts. And if you want a physical issue of the publication, it looks like this. It's real. You can pay for the production cost, which I guess is €5, and then shipping if you want a physical copy. But until now, I'm just going to actually just hand it out, and then you guys can share these 3 copies and really practice the mentality. If you're interested. But I think that if there's one thing that I want to leave you with, and that I want you to really take with you from this talk, is really that the future is whatever we make it. It's not a destination. It's not defined. The future is a direction, and we can all be part of shaping it. And I think this is how I really see our role as designers, is that we basically need to design better solutions than what we are offered today and what we're trained as today. Otherwise, we're just going to keep using a system that is not very sustainable. Thank you so much for taking your time, and thank you for having me, David. If anyone has any questions, you are more than welcome to ask them. Yes?
I'm first year student in design products. My name is Dr. Nice to meet you. It was a very good presentation.
Thank you.
My question is, how do you brief yourself in SPACE10? Are you starting to come together and how to look at the problems of the world, or how do you start that project? Is it completely brief, or you just brief yourself?
It's a really good question. And that has been, a big challenge with actually being fully funded by here, like who briefs us. And the answer is that we don't receive any briefs in terms of saying how do we make like a new outdoor collection for people in the countryside. However, we are briefed in that sense that everything we do should find new ways for IKEA to create a better and more sustainable way of living. So that is sort of the overall brief that we get. And of course, we are also working within areas that make sense for IKEA. So we are not suddenly diving into medicine or something like that. It's too far away. So it's a relationship that is very much built on trust and intuition. But the briefs we sort of come up with ourselves, using the world as sort of the brief. Yes?
Do you feel that the values that you sort of shared about emphasizing collaboration over competition and sort of has filtered through your process of sharing your projects through the internet, do you think that it's a critical part of why you guys have been successful to this point?
Because we share things on the internet? Yeah, I mean, to be honest, the reason why, I mean, at least some people think that we are successful is because we work with externals, again, surrounding ourselves with people who are smarter than us or better than us. And I think in order to actually create that, because it also takes a lot, if we were sitting as a key innovation lab, basically inviting people in and like, give us your ideas, it would never work. I think the reason why this works is because we have so many people coming from advertising, for example. And suddenly you have some of the best paid, brightest creatives that have spent their career using their creativity, their expertise to sell sugar water and chili products, when you use more money on actually selling the product than designing the product. And I think that the luxury of being able to free up a mind like this and say, now your brief is not to sell more sugar water, now your brief is to fix this challenge. I think that is something that people really connect well with. And then of course, that that we share the research, that you can go in if interested in this area. And it's also from a selfish point of view, because one thing is that we share things, but we also get so much in return. So this is also, this is not altruism in any way, where we are basically just, like we get so much in return. And actually the way that we connect with a lot of the talents and creators we work with, or specialists, is because we have sent out some project that they are then working with. So instead of having some huge department actually mapping out who are all the front runners in a certain field, they often connect with us. And I know already now, like James and I are going to have I don't know if you drink beer, but I'm going to have a beer after this. And we are going to discuss some opportunities in this conversation we have to come and share our work. I went a little sidetrack, but yes, share, for God's sake. It's a little bit like, I think it was Elon Musk who once said that if you actually, if you're sitting on a sinking ship and you have the design for a bucket, then you have to share that design, because everybody needs a bucket now, because like, you cannot just sit alone. Yes? Yes. Yes.
I know that a lot of the students here that I've got one final project on the idea.
Yeah.
And I think that really showed the idea that the name prototype visualize around that. But it seems like a lot of the things we're discussing, they don't exist as things, but we can discuss them because they exist as prototypes.
Exactly. I think that's if we started with how do we make this a reality, how do we design in real life, then we would meet so many obstacles that we would give up, or at least elude the idea of water it down, water it down, water it down, and then we have to. Here we can actually go up by just using visualization, saying, this is a vision, this is where we're heading, and that gives direction for everybody that sort of the sum of all the small steps that takes us there again. So yeah, I mean that's a huge part of the work that we do, to say this is where we would like to go, who would like to help us get us there. Anyway.
Yes, so the business model right here is affordability and accessibility, but also by doing that means that we have products that are extremely low. And I was wondering if you think that, are they, is IKEA in the countryside to assess whether or not we can consume less, making the durable things, and get what your insight is the company brands as a technology, are they willing to change?
Could everybody hear the question? The question was, now I stand up here and talk a lot about sustainability, circular economy, so on and so on, but obviously we're funded by IKEA. IKEA is a huge fucking company that use 1% of all commercial wood in the world, that of course have a huge impact on the planet, and the question is, are IKEA ready to change? Are they actually ready to adopt some of these ideas? And again, that's also the only reason why I can work for a company like IKEA, and now you actually asked the question. But IKEA but have since the last, I think 6 years, invested 2 billion euros in renewable energy, which means that by New Year's they're producing more energy than they consume. They are looking into how every product can be made of recycled materials and be recycled again. And they are actually having a vision of going full-blown circular. And of course, going circular for a company like IKEA that is sort of born out of the industrial age where everything was take, make, dispose. It's a huge challenge, and of course there's a lot of answers we don't have yet. But we actually started also together with James 2 years ago, where we basically took IKEA designers to Copenhagen, Barcelona, and really looked at how can we start scrapping waste from the streets, and said how can we turn that into products. So yeah, for sure they are serious about it. They're just more humble than I am. So they don't really talk about it, also because IKEA is such an easy target in a way. So they don't really talk about it, they just do it. That's also what I like about it, is that they actually invest this money, they don't talk about it. They do a food waste program where they have saved 1 million meals since they launched it less than a year ago. And they are really doing a lot to completely transform their entire business. And that is also where we come in, is to really see how can we make a radical change fast. So yeah, they are investing their money, but they don't really talk about it. But they're doing a lot. Because I could continue, they use a lot of cotton as well, so they actually go down, train the farmers and how to use less water and all kind of things. So they are on the factory floor, really looking at how can they improve on all the ingredients they have in this. Yes?
How much of your works, the vision of your concept actually go to IKEA?
We have some projects that do. Like for example, IKEA Face, the augmented reality app. Sometimes we have to feed the bear to have a picnic in peace. But what we're looking into is not to innovate IKEA's current business. They're already great at innovation habits in all organizations, and they're doing an incredible job. Our job is actually more to diversify IKEA's business. So what new business could IKEA be in 10, 20 years? And then of course, I'm going to be called IKEA. So we are looking into actually venturing entirely new companies, where you could say 3 years ago there was an illustration, a vision of something, and then over the years we have a 3-year birthday in 2 weeks, but slowly we are actually building up those concepts in order to actually launch them. And then of course if IKEA goes into architecture, I mean, I don't think anybody, not even IKEA's own employee, would like to live in an IKEA building or an IKEA house or something. So the new ventures that we're going to launch are going to be not IKEA owned. But we do have some projects that we directly into the mothership.
So I think we've got time for one more question.
Yes?
Me? Oh. Yeah, I don't know, yeah, well, you're like IKEA, but still I'm asking this question now.
Sorry?
So, yeah, you don't directly represent IKEA, so I don't know if it's the right question to ask, but so I was wondering, well, because I knew already that IKEA was doing all of these kind of innovative projects and looking into circular economy, but I saw then, on the other hand, this double moral where actually even only in the area where I live here in London, I already spotted 4 block tables on the edge of the corner of the street. So how are these two kind of very extreme sides of IKEA? Do they have any intersections, or do you know that?
Like you're asking, what about the responsibility of people actually throwing out these products that either because of the quality or because they're so cheap that you can just buy something new?
Yeah, I mean that would be something where IKEA could make a change, I guess. So
yeah, sure.
Are your projects feeding into that as well? Like in a positive way? Like is there something about like the situation right now?
Yes, and I mean that is the challenge of the circular economy, is saying, okay, before IKEA would sort of say, okay, this is not our responsibility, we sort of sold the product. What people do with it is sort of on them in a way. but now they're taking that responsibility and they've done for a long time to actually say, okay, but then again, in terms of the system, how do we actually take those products back? How do we actually feed that in to become new materials? And that is the big challenge, and that is what we are working on. And I will let you know when we actually come up with a solution, because that's another thing, is the future of IKEA also to become a waste management company, where you know half of the store is basically taking back all the products and turning it into new. That could be pretty cool. But we'll see. I'm not an engineer either, so yeah, I tried once to really sort of see, okay, how do we do this, and it was too complex for me.
Thank you very much.